Hi, everyone. Welcome to the live series Straight Off the Bat. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. I'm your host, Pauline Joseph, and if you're joining us from Facebook, um, do a little subscribe there now. Follow us. I'll wait. Uh, if you want to see information about managing your money and content showing up in your newsfeed, because now is the time we need to learn about your money, smash that subscribe button, and continue seeing our content. So today we're discussing somewhat of a heavy conversation, but that's okay. I believe that our guest is fully equipped to share information. We're going to talk about elder financial abuse and power of attorney and why seniors are at risk with Nicole-Anna de Silva. She's an attorney at law and an ACCA qualified accountant. She has been practicing law for over a decade. Presently, she's the chairperson of the legal committee of the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. She also advises RBC on legal issues throughout the Caribbean arising in the retail, business, and corporate lines of businesses in banking. Apart from her professional duties, she's a wife and mother of a vicarious, vivacious toddler, and she loves to spend time with her family and traveling. So I think we have a few things in common. Let's just bring it in, Nicole. Anna, hi. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Pauline, and good morning to all the viewers and participants in this session.
Okay.
It's my
So
pleasure to be here.
great. And as I mentioned earlier, this uncomfortable conversations. A lot of us try to run away as far as possible from them. But if there's one thing, there's a fact in life that none of us can run away from is getting old. I mean, we could throw some dye in our hair. Um, we can, do as much as we can, but ultimately, getting old is a fact of life. So when it comes to um, in that space, why is it important for us to understand what a power of attorney is?
That's an excellent question, and I'm just going to take you up on one point. Getting old is a privilege, and it really is a privilege that most of us would like to strive through to. And in terms of powers of attorney, you find that sometimes our senior citizens or elderly persons may grant a power of attorney to a person to act on their behalf. And essentially, what a power of attorney is a legal instrument which allows a person to act on another person's behalf. And the power of attorney usually sets out what is the authority the person possesses. So it would say whether the person is able to make deposits, whether the person is able to make withdrawals, whether the person is able to make investments on behalf of the elderly person. And usually it is a registered power of attorney, particularly in our jurisdiction. So why it is an issue, particularly from the banking perspective, is that it can sometimes be used as a vehicle for elder financial abuse. And sitting as the chair of the legal committee, sitting as a banker, sitting as someone who works in the banking industry and provides advice in relation to these matters, I really think it is important for us to have this type of conversation. I think that it is important for the public to be aware of the issues arising in relation to the use of powers of attorney, particularly for elders, and to really generate an environment where all persons, including our senior citizens, feel comfortable to raise an issue where they see, their power of attorney that they may have been granted to somebody else, appointing somebody else to act on their behalf, is being misused. So really and truly kudos to BAT for creating this environment and sensitizing the public.
That's great, and I love your outputs. Well, your outlook on what it means to get old, because a lot of us are so caught up in the actual time passing by. The privilege of it is something we take for granted. And when it comes to this conversation around assigning a power of attorney, at what age are we having that conversation? Because I've had a very difficult and annoying conversation with my parents about how, will, right? Nobody wants to talk about it. No one wants to talk about a will. But I had that conversation with them. But then in hindsight, I'm like, I don't even have one. So what is, a conversation that you're going to have in your 30s, 40s, that you're going to have this power of attorney conversation?
Well, the power of attorney conversation is not a necessary conversation for everyone to undertake. Really and truly, a power of attorney is when you want someone to act on your behalf, but it's not necessary that you have a power of attorney. So the power of attorney is more of appointing someone almost as your agent to do things on your behalf, perhaps if you're out of the country, and that is for an elderly person, that is for a younger person. It really is not limited to use by elderly persons. And I think I'm going to digress from the topic a little bit and say kudos to you, Pauline, for having the conversation with your parents in relation to, creating a will, ensuring that they crystallize on paper what are their wishes when they pass on. But the power of attorney is most relevant when persons are alive. When a person dies, who would have granted a power of attorney, essentially the power of attorney dies with that person. The person appointed under the power of attorney is no longer granted the authority to act on behalf of the donor. So you'll hear me say donor and donee from time to time, and a donor is the person who grants the power of attorney. So it's almost like donation of blood. And the donee is the person who has the authority to act on the other person's behalf. So the power of attorney conversation is a little different from the creation of a will, but certainly they're all aligned in terms of ensuring that the person who grants the instrument, their best interests are being represented, both during life and at death.
I feel like I'm getting a lot of worth in this conversation. A lot of people are just joining us, and we're here having a conversation around elder financial abuse and power of attorney with Nicole-Anna de Silva. Now, when it comes to the responsibility of a power of attorney, I feel like the legal system in general, I was sitting down, based on a true story, sitting down, reading the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, and let me tell you, Nicole, it is not meant for the faint of heart because it's to translate those words and, trying to understand all those things, it feels like a foreign language. So when it comes to responsibility of power of attorney, what does that actually mean? Because, it's one thing to say, okay, you can go cash a check on my behalf. But what are the key 3 points that we should understand when it comes to that phrase, power of attorney?
Sure. So the key 3 points I think that we should zero in on in any discussion surrounding a power of attorney is what is a person who granted the power, what do they intend for you as a person who has the power to do on their behalf? Usually, the power of attorney would be specific in terms of the authorities that that person has, or in some instances, it may be general. So you have a general power of attorney outlining, okay, this person is allowed to act on my behalf, a general statement. And there are sometimes specific authorities included in a power of attorney. So you try to limit it in terms of time, in terms of the actions that you can take. So those are the two main areas I would say that you think about when looking at a power of attorney, the authorities allowed, and what is the person's best interests, and ensuring that you are representing their best interests in all actions that you do. The third point or factor that I think you should take into account when looking at a power of attorney is whether it is in fact valid. So, as you rightly said, Pauline, looking at the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, or laws in general, looking at legal instruments from time to time, even powers of attorney, you may be looking at it and you may think to yourself, is this English? Do I understand everything that is being written, or everything that is written in the power of attorney? And that's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate that sometimes the powers of attorney are so convoluted that the person who grants the power may not be aware of each and every aspect of the authorities that they would have granted to the other person. So in terms of looking at the validity of the power of attorney, we would consider from a legal perspective whether the person who granted the power of attorney is still mentally capable, whether the person who has the authority to act on the donor's behalf, is still mentally capable, whether any of the persons listed in the power of attorney, whether donor or donee, whether they have passed on and someone else is attempting to act on behalf of the person appointed via the power of attorney. All of those factors go into considering whether this power of attorney is still valid in Trinidad and Tobago. So I think that is also an important consideration when looking at powers of attorney. The interest of the person granting the power of attorney, whether the language in the power of attorney is general or specific, what are the specific authorities granted to the attorney or the donee appointed by the power of attorney, and whether it's still valid.
Now,
I hope I didn't say too many words and convolute the conversation.
That's okay. The more information, the better, because I know what lawyer fees cost. So give us everything now, right? And you mentioned something there about Trinidad and Tobago laws, and funny enough, we do have a comment in our YouTube channel. By the way, guys, we are on YouTube, so you could follow us there if somebody's not on Facebook or LinkedIn. And one was asking for their daughter to act on their behalf because there was an account, some mix-up that she wanted. I don't know exactly what she wanted to do, but she was asking what can she do to get her daughter to act on her behalf for this transaction in the bank. Now she's in the States. What exactly in terms of their options does that person have?
Well, there are quite a few options for that person. And first of all, I'm going to put that little legal caveat that all lawyers say that this is not constituting legal advice, but certainly in terms of guiding that type of discussion and encouraging that user or person attending this session to seek further legal advice, what I would say is a power of attorney is an option once it is created in accordance with the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. It can be used within our jurisdiction. So what I would suggest that person do is contact an attorney at law, ensure that they are very clear in terms of what is the authority they would like their daughter to exercise in terms of clearing up a transaction on their account, and ask or seek guidance from the attorney as to whether a power of attorney can be created, or whether it may be an instance where that person may want to contact the bank directly to find out if written instructions that are notarized because the person is abroad would suffice to allow the person to act on their behalf. So there are options, and as a member of the banking community, I must put forward the notion that we also have digital banking. So it is an option that I would encourage all to exercise, to sign up for digital banking, because it may be, as our user is abroad, you can sign in and log into the digital banking app. You can send a secured message to the bank requesting whatever clarification or solution to an issue that you have, and there may be no need for your daughter to act on your behalf. So that is also an option that I just wanted to highlight.
Thank you for that, Nicole-Anna. As I am here representing the common man, I am the common man. What options would they have if they don't have digital banking? Because during the lockdown, a lot of folks may have been away, have been locked out of the country. And I know you can't speak on behalf of all banks, but just from a general perspective, what can that person do if they don't have the online banking?
Well, Pauline, we are all, first of all, I'm going to say we are all a common man. We are all members of society, whether we're employed with a bank or not, we all have these issues to deal with. So if you don't presently have digital banking, there is nothing standing in your way from signing up for digital banking online. If it is not something that you are ready to proceed with at this point, you're just a little bit reticent about, signing up for digital banking, I still am going to encourage you to consider it as an option. But if that's not the option for you at this moment, contacting the bank, finding out if written instructions notarized in front of a notary would be sufficient, depending on what is the transaction or the issue you're trying to clarify, may be an option as well. And or you can contact a local attorney at law to assist you in terms of preparing a power of attorney in accordance with the laws of Trinidad and Tobago. And that power of attorney can be sent to you for execution and sent back to Trinidad for use. But you see, because of the back and forth, I still encourage you to consider the digital banking option because it may be a shorter, more efficient option for you to resolve your issue. But without the full ambit of the facts, I wouldn't be able to provide much more guidance, but certainly those are some options to consider.
Thank you so much for that, Nicole-Anna. I think that was some very great insight. And we have a question from Jonathan, but we're going to go on a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to continue the conversation about elder financial abuse, power of attorney, and why seniors are at risk. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the live series Straight Off the Bat. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. I am your host, Pauline Joseph, and if you're joining us from YouTube, and I see you, Jonathan, you have a question, don't worry. We got you. We'll ask Nicole-Anna that just now. Don't forget to smash the subscribe button and continue seeing content that'll help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing elder financial abuse and power of attorney and why seniors are at risk with Nicole-Anna de Silva. She's a power of attorney. I've said that so many times. She's an attorney at law and an ACCA qualified accountant. She has been practicing law for over a decade, and we want to bring her in because, as I mentioned earlier, them lawyer fees. Because if we get in this free, guys, let's squeeze as much as we can from Nicole-Anna today, right? All right. So we've been through the conversation around power of attorney, what it is, what it means. But before we move on, I want to make sure and ask this question from Jonathan Jones. Could I pass on my power of attorney authority due? And I'm not sure exactly. Does that as a technical term?
Well, I am not certain if that question is complete, but permit me to make some assumptions and perhaps our user could just clarify that I'm on the right track in terms of the question. Perhaps what is being asked is whether the power of attorney authority can pass on subsequent to the person who grants the power of attorney dying. And if this is the correct interpretation of the question, I would say no in direct response to that interpretation of the question. It's once the donor or the person who grants the power of attorney dies, your power of attorney is no longer valid. So at that point, that is where we get into the administration of estates, the distribution of assets, and really the conversation that you would have been having with your parents, Pauline, in terms of ensuring that you have a will so that an executor could be appointed through a grant of probate being issued by the court. So once you pass on, the power of attorney is no longer valid. I'm hopeful that I would have interpreted that question correctly, but I stand to correction.
Yes, you did.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Jonathan,
Okay,
he
excellent.
went into the comments and you got it. You have it. So when it comes
Excellent.
to and I'm sure that question would have helped other people watching this now as well as on a replay. So when it comes to getting older, because we had this conversation, if you guys missed it, because we do have a lot of people watching this live right now. Thanks so much, guys. You may have missed the first part, but we were talking about aging, and as Nicole-Anna rightfully mentioned, it's a privilege. And when it comes to getting older, there's a lot of things that happen with our bodies, which I am in complete denial of. I swear I'm going to ride till I'm 90 something. But I'm sure my body will tell me otherwise. And you lose certain things, your hearing, certain abilities as you get older. So with that comes, this vulnerability. So what in your space and what you've seen and experienced, Nicole-Anna, what is elder abuse?
So, elder abuse, and I'm going to narrow it a little bit more to elder financial abuse. So, elder financial abuse is when someone takes money or property from an older person without their knowledge, understanding, or consent. And it can involve stealing assets, taking control of assets, or using coercion and undue influence over the elderly person to force them to give over assets. So that's a very simplified version of elder financial abuse. And it is something that is so prevalent, not only in Trinidad, but throughout the world. And I think because we don't have conversations as much as we should, it is not being highlighted as anyone would like. So last week we would have had World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, and there would have been really fantastic conversations throughout the island on elder abuse, particularly highlighting elder financial abuse. I am aware that the Ministry of Social Development would have had a webinar on this and would have highlighted that their unit, their division of aging, would have received 77 reports in the first quarter of this year of elder abuse, with over 20% of those reports focusing on elder financial abuse. Now, to me, those statistics are really unfortunate at this stage of your life when you are a senior citizen to be taken advantage of, whether it is the misuse of your ATM card, whether it is someone using a joint account without your knowledge, whether it is the misuse of the proceeds of your pension check. That should never be the case. How we treat our vulnerable persons, how we treat our elderly persons, our senior citizens, and what I like to call the members of our mature population. How we treat them really is a touchstone as to where we are as a society. We are in a phase, and I know that I'm getting very passionate about it, but we are in a stage and phase where we're in the midst of a pandemic. And to me, it should never be that our elderly persons are in a vulnerable state and being taken advantage of. It should never be that our elderly persons are unaware of the transactions happening on their accounts. So I would have alluded to earlier, the convenience of digital banking, and that is one of the things that I wanted to highlight. When you have access to digital banking, you have access to your transaction records, and you are able to monitor what transactions are happening on your account. And I think that is extremely important. And it would be remiss of me to say that every single person would be able to access digital banking at all times. But certainly for those members of our mature population, if you can, I strongly recommend that you do. We all have, a community of care in different forms, fashions, and different constitutions, really and truly. And our mature members of our mature population, I think they are entitled to have members of their community of care persons who care for them, who look out for them, who, whether they are performing transactions on their behalf as a result of being appointed by a power of attorney, or whether they are do transactions on their behalf based on the fact that they are joint an account, they are entitled to persons acting in their best interest. And I really am passionate about highlighting the issue of elder financial abuse, highlighting the importance of awareness, the importance of, as we say locally, minding our business, ensuring that there are vehicles for our elderly persons to mind their business and not stand in the way of that. So that's just a short tidbit from me.
We love the passion, Nicole-Anna. Don't worry. I feel you. I feel you. And the fact that those 7 reports, that doesn't encounter the ones who didn't report, because there's a lot of, embarrassment. They don't feel like sharing the information. And there's the older generation don't necessarily like to talk. I'm gonna really want to say that. But in the conversation around digital banking, for those who don't know, we did a session actually around what's the role of data in digital banking with David Herrick. And that was a very informative session. We'll put a link in the comments below. That's on YouTube as well as LinkedIn and Facebook, right? So, I was actually going to go into that conversation around some of the things that an elderly person could do, but I think the digital banking is definitely one of them. I want to go into the comments because Adana have a question here. Listen, Adana, you're talking to my soul with this question, because I mentioned it earlier, as well as the fact that it was mentioned in Insecure, which is a very popular show. So I'm gonna start with the question: how do we start the conversation around the need for power of attorney with parents or elders who may not be ready to put such protections in place? And I feel this question to my soul. So Nicole-Anna, please help us, help our parents.
Well, I think we all want to be in a position to help our parents. But sometimes it may be that our parents don't necessarily need the help at this point. So let's start the conversation with ensuring that you are having conversations with your parent, keeping in touch, keeping the lines of communication open. And when you start hearing your parents complaining about not being able to understand a particular transaction, not being able to attend the bank physically because they have particular ailments, then it may be an important discussion to have if there is a need for power of attorney. Now, there are other channels through which your parents can access their banking information and transactions. So it may be that we don't need to use the power of attorney to be able to assist our parents. And I think that is one of the things that I want persons to lead this session with. Powers of attorney were very relevant and very, very popular when we had more paper-based transactions happening. But as we move towards digital banking and digitizing and using e-commerce, I think it's important for our parents to know how to use these different channels. And it doesn't take a power of attorney for us to introduce our parents to the digital banking app, to ensure that they understand what's happening, to help them if there's an update to the digital banking app. What I think brings in the conversation of elder financial abuse is where persons who are placed in a position of trust, placed in a position of authority, abuse that authority in terms of, trying to access your parent's account. And it may not be you. It may not be you, but it may be a caregiver of your parent. So it is important, I think, to come away from this conversation not only focusing on the use of powers of attorney, but focusing on broadening the perspective in terms of how do we help our parents continue to be financially literate, continue to be aware of what's happening with their finances, to continue to have the discussions, because at certain ages and stages, you don't really want to talk about your entire account balance with your entire community of care. And you are entitled to do that. You're entitled as a mature person, a person in the mature population, or any really person existing in society, to make the decision that you want to keep your financial information private or within a very small community. And with that notion, it's important to be able to track what's happening with your finances. So powers of attorney were good and still remain good in certain circumstances, but there are so many options that are available to us and to our elderly persons now that could bring so much convenience, that could keep us in the know, that I think we have to broaden the conversation away from powers of attorney with our parents and ask our parents, when last you logged into your digital banking app? If you have a joint account with your parents, which you have access to the runnings of their transactions, asking them, you saw this charge that happened on Saturday. What you know about this charge? And to just bring that conversation and sensitization to our parents to ensure that they are not being placed in a vulnerable position. That's what I am hopeful that people take away from this conversation. We have more options. Let's exercise them.
Thanks for that, Nicole-Anna. What I'm hearing, though, Adana, is what she's telling us is we have to be patient with them when we put out HTTPS and they're typing out the URL. We just need to breathe because they're learning.
Pauline, let me just say one thing. And this is a very candid conversation among everyone on this session. I was late to the game to digital banking. And truly, as I entered the banking industry, I was still going into the banking halls, enjoying my conversations with all the banking staff, spending many hours, and really not getting not being efficient. And it is through the intervention of my husband, who said, it is time for you to get the digital banking app, that I have changed my ways and I have seen the improvement, particularly during COVID. Being able to pay all my bills, pay the hairdresser, pay for services at home. I mean, if I transpose that to our mature members of the mature population, not having to go into the bank to cash a check, but being able to deposit the check through the ATM, being able to monitor my balance just from my phone or my tablet or my iPad. These things are here for us to use. We don't necessarily need the power of attorney to ask somebody to act on our behalf, to go into the branch, to be able to go and do transactions on our behalf when we have the digital banking access. So let us be patient with our parents and patient with ourselves, because I was a part of that population and I can attest to the efficiency that it has brought to my life. And it's not I'm not saying that it's not important to continue to maintain your relationship with the bank as a customer. It's not important. I'm not saying that you may not have to come to the bank from time to time, but I am saying that there are other channels. Be open to using the other channels. And as children, and not only as children, but as persons who have the skills and the ability to assist other persons, including members of the mature population, to bring them into the fold of digital banking and having that convenience, I encourage all of us to be patient, because I know that my husband exercised great patience in assisting me with digital banking. So that's my little tidbit.
Nicole-Anna, I feel like you're calling me out there because as somebody who is accustomed to being digital, I'm like, what? Why are you not online yet? But it's fine. It's okay. Okay, I'm learning as well. I'm not just hosting, I'm learning. And thank you so much for being transparent during this time. We appreciate that. So I have I had some questions to ask you, but I feel like this comment section is so lit right now. We have some questions to answer, but we will come back to that right after the break.
But that was like my first experience with money. Very, very first experience.
I've been in banking since I was a teenager.
And welcome back to the live series Straight Off the Bat. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. I am your host, Pauline Joseph, and if you're joining us from LinkedIn, thank you so much. Don't forget to like and follow our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing elder financial abuse and power of attorney and why seniors are at risk with Nicole-Anna de Silva. She's an attorney at law and an ACCA qualified accountant, and she's been practicing law for over a decade. She's also the chairperson of the legal committee of the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. So let's bring in Nicole-Anna because we have quite a number of questions in the comments. Just a FYI, Adana says, thank you so much. You did respond to her question as it relates to when you have the conversation about power of attorney with the parents. And if you missed that response, don't worry. Once this live is over, you can replay it, as well as you can share this video on your news feed. So, maybe indirectly tell your parents, hey, watch this video. You can tag them. It's fine. So going into the comment section, and City is asking, is there a recommended age or signs for power of attorney to be implemented?
Well, first of all, I would say there is no recommended age or signs. It is more situational. So if it is a situation where there is a need for someone to be appointed to act on behalf of an elderly person, then a power of attorney is an option. What we must always consider is the mental capacity of the person granting the power of attorney. So it's a difficult conversation to have. It is a difficult topic to address, but mental health issues really transcend our operation as a society. So if the elderly person or the senior citizen who is granting the power of attorney is not mentally capable to handle their financial affairs, a power of attorney is not an option. In that instance, a more appropriate option is to go before the court and have a court order be issued appointing someone to act on behalf of that elderly person. So that's the first step. Once the elderly person has the mental capacity to act on their behalf in terms of their financial affairs, the power of attorney is open for use. I would suggest that the power of attorney outlines specifically what are the authorities that the person who is being appointed via the power of attorney, what they are able to do, whether they are able to deposit and withdraw but nothing else, or whether they are able to have ATMs, digital banking access, etc. And all of those things should be itemized in the power of attorney. It is an option as well to limit the power of attorney to a specific time period, so it can state specifically that it's going to be terminated on X date, whether it's July 1st, 2022 or another date. Or it can be general and have no limitations in terms of time. But once we all know that the power of attorney ceases to be valid once the person who grants the power of attorney revokes it, or the person who grants the power of attorney dies, or the person who grants the power of attorney becomes mentally incapable, or the same factors applies to the person who has that power of attorney. So I wouldn't say that it is dependent on an age or stage, but it's more of a situation. If they are just not able to attend the bank and transact on their behalf due to being out of the country or physical limitations, but they still have the mental capacity to do it. So I hope I answered that question.
Yes, I believe so, and you're very thorough. So if you want to follow up with that, City, you can let us know in the comment section. So going back to the comment area, and Josanne has a question that actually is preview to some of the questions we had as it relates to the banking space. So how do banks protect against abuse in the form of misuse?
In the form of misuse of the power of attorney
Yes.
is what I'm gathering from the question. So, insofar as the misuse of the power of attorney, what we try to do as a bank, particularly when the power of attorney is very general, is we try to have that verification. Now, each bank has their own policies in terms of how they treat with powers of attorney, but generally, the experience should be that there's verification with the client, ensure that the authority that the person who is coming into the banking halls trying to transact on behalf of our client, it is within their authority to do so. So that verification process may take the form of a phone call, may take the form of the bank asking for specific written instructions from the donor, our client, confirming that we can go ahead with this transaction. It may take the form of an email depending on the banking policies, but there should be follow-up steps to ensure that we verify that there's the authority to act based on this person who is appointed by the power of attorney coming in and giving us instructions. Because really, what I would like everyone to take away is that persons appointed via power of attorney, so when our client provides a power of attorney to another person to act on their behalf, what we rarely see is a faceless representation of our client. And if we find or if we note that that person is asking us to do a transaction that is not in our client's best interest, we have a duty as a bank to really ask a little more questions. You know, we are put on caution and we really try to ask or find out whether our client has authorized this transaction. And I know that it may be a little frustrating from the client's perspective because it may delay your transaction. It may, we may not be able to contact you at a particular point in time, so we may have to come back to you and clarify the point. And you may be thinking, well, I have a power of attorney. Why is the bank asking me all these questions? But we want to ensure that your best interests are being maintained. So that is one of the ways we try to do it.
And I
Hope I
can
answered
attest.
Josanne's
Yes.
questions.
Yes, and I can attest to that as a customer as well, because I've had situations where, I get a call from the bank saying, "Did you do this?" Because obviously there's a rhythm that we all have. There's certain supermarkets that we all go to. There's, it just familiarity. So when something is odd, I want that call to happen because, not every day one may go purchase a bicycle, so it's good to have those things in place. So just to follow up on the second part of the question, what protection is offered to elders who grant access to their accounts via their digital platform option in the absence of a power of attorney? And it sounds like it's sharing sensitive information here. I'm not sure. You can take this question.
But in this instance, I am making the assumption that if you're sharing your banking information with someone else in terms of digital access, that person is also an account holder for whatever account it may be. If the person is not an account holder, you should not be sharing your digital banking details with that person, because it really is for you to hold confidentially. So I just want to make that very clear that if you are providing persons with your digital banking credentials, you are taking a risk. And it is not a risk that we would recommend from the banking perspective or from the legal perspective. If you are appointing the person to act on your behalf through a power of attorney, and you wish that person appointed via power of attorney to have digital access to your account, that is also a risk. And it may be some banks don't have that capability operationally, because each bank has their own operations and procedures. But if you are granting that person digital access, you are taking a risk. And what I would suggest, from just being a member of citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago, is that you continue to monitor your account. Continue to monitor your account, even if it is a trusted friend, even if it is a family member. Monitor your account for any strange transactions, and do not hesitate to reach out to the bank to flag a transaction that you have not authorized, particularly when that person is acting under power of attorney. It is supremely important for us to create environments where, and I say us from the banking perspective as well as us as a population, to create an environment where someone sees something, they can say something. So if you note that your account is being misused or abused, it is important and incumbent on you to notify the bank so that certain steps can be taken to try to stop or to assist in this regard. It truly is. So there are risks attached to providing authority to your account to other persons, particularly when those persons are not account holders. You can persons do it through powers of attorney, but just know that it is a risk. And as the client or customer who is the holder of the funds, who is the owner of the funds, it really is incumbent on you to monitor your account and to alert the bank on any transactions that you have not authorized.
Thank you for that, Nicole-Anna. So, we actually did cover in a previous live session with Kwame from the Republic Bank Limited. We had a session called "Is Digital Banking Safe for Senior Citizens?" So we'll also put that in the comment section, a link, and that would be a great space for you to check on that. Right. So we have one or two more questions to answer, but we will come back to that right after the break. And welcome back to live series Straight Off the Bat. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. I am your host, Pauline Joseph, and if you are joining us from Facebook, smash that follow button and continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we are discussing elder financial abuse and power of attorney and why senior citizens are at risk with Nicole-Anna de Silva. So we're going to bring her right back in because we have a short period of time and a lot of stuff to squeeze out of her, because as attorney at law and someone who's been practicing for over a decade, we want to get this information because we all know how much that has charge power. All right. I had real questions, but Olia just slide into the comments. I was like, nah, let me take this. So let me head over to YouTube. Jonathan wants to know, while digital banking is posed as a solution for the elder financial elder financial use. Are the apps easy for the elder folks?
And I can say without reservation that the digital banking apps for use locally are very easy to use. So I strongly recommend, and this is no endorsement for any particular institution, I strongly recommend taking a look at the app, navigating, signing up for the app, getting access to the app. I strongly recommend it. And it is easy for use for elderly persons as well. And if you have any issues in terms of use, you can contact the bank. You can, even operating within this Trinidad and Tobago beautiful community, if you have trusted persons that you would like to bounce, some questions off of, that is also an option, but just noting that you want to make sure and keep your information private. So ensure that you keep your banking information confidential, keep your digital banking IDs and passwords confidential to ensure that you're securing yourself as well. But they are very easy to use. Very, very easy. Great
Agreed.
interface.
Yes, agreed. Because I am seeing my mother using YouTube as a way to learn how to sew. Using social media as a way to connect to people who have similar interests. And if she can do it, I feel like we could translate that skill set to just signing in online and checking in, which is something that, we're seeing that shift across. And when you have this individual, this elderly individual who has grown comfortable with the space, said, okay, I am checking on my stuff every week. How can the actual elder identify, after they've identified the power of attorney has been misused, how can they rescind that actual they've given this rule, but they realize, okay, there's a mistrust and you mistrust use of funds. How can they rescind this?
They can just resend it in writing. So sending a note to the bank signed saying that they are rescinding the authority for this person to act on their behalf is an important step. Contacting the bank and flagging any suspicious transactions is also an important step. We also have the Division of Aging, having an older person's information center where reports are made, where we as bankers or as financial institutions, we're really hard pressed in terms of sharing your personal, private, confidential financial information. So we may not be able to assist in that regard unless we have a court order, but certainly engaging those units or going to the TTPS to make a report where you see a suspicious transaction. Those are also steps that you can take after you would have revoked your power of attorney. But the first step, in order to stop the misuse, you can revoke the power of attorney by sending your revocation in writing to the bank.
I love that you use the word revoke, because I was going to come back and say, okay, this rescinding just doesn't feel like we say that in a lot. It feels like a legal term. It's like, it's to cancel, just FYI. So thank you for that.
No problem at all.
Okay, so when it comes to, we've been speaking about power of attorney, what does it mean, as well as elderly abuse. But when it comes to assigning that power of attorney, when does it take effect? And is there like a time frame, a deadline? How does that work?
Well, the power of attorney, from the banking perspective, we would only act on a registered power of attorney. So once a registered power of attorney is presented to the bank, then we would be able to act on it, depending on what are the authorities or powers included in the power of attorney. So upon registration and presentation to the bank, that's when it will take effect from our perspective.
And so
I love how I say our as a banker.
It's okay. This is a weak conversation. This is information being shared. And, is this something that you have to, there's a specific law? I know this is not constitutional legal advice, but for someone who has no idea where to begin, do they walk into a lawyer's office to be like, hey, this is what I need?
Yes. And saying exactly what you need is important. So it may be that in conversation with your attorney, you come across other aspects of your daily existence, or whether it's your financial dealings where you need assistance in terms of someone else acting on your behalf and acting in your best interest. But that having that conversation with your attorney is important. So that is where the nitty gritty comes out.
Okay, good to know. So for those who may have missed earlier, we had a conversation around what the public sector is doing to drive awareness, and also there were reports of, 77 incidences of people abusing the elderly within Trinidad and Tobago. So if you want to be proactive about this thing and say, you know what, I've watched this live show on Bank Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and I want to ensure that I'm going to reduce the likelihood of this happening. So you have the common, someone, I don't know. Actually, I say the common, I don't know what it is. That's why I'm asking a question. What is some of the more popular ways that folks are looking to abuse elderly folks in the financial space?
Well, what I have seen coming across my desk, as well as what I have heard in just in conversation, would be the abuse of ATM cards. So using an elderly person's ATM card to access their account, as well as getting into complex financial transactions, acting on behalf of the elderly person, and or using the elderly person's property as your security for these types of transactions, where the elderly person is not aware of the true repercussions of standing as surety, or guaranteeing, or ensuring that the loan is being repaid, or not understanding what exactly is the banking facility that is being offered to this person who is acting on my behalf, or who I am supporting in this particular credit facility. That is particularly important. So in those instances, you may find that the bank may ask for an independent legal advice to be provided to the elderly person to ensure that they understand what the transaction involves and their role in the transaction and the risks associated with the transactions. In terms of stealing of the ATM cards, the bank is a little hard pressed in terms of when you give access to another person. It give access of your ATM card to another person. So we continue to reinforce the message that this should be a practice that you should not undertake. There is also the pension checks and cashing of the pension checks and misusing the funds from the pension checks. You see that quite a bit, where sometimes the elderly person is not aware as to what would have happened with the funds when the pension check would have been cashed, or they have fallen behind on bill payments because there was an expectation that the person who assisted them in terms of the cashing of the pension check would have paid certain bills and they would not have. So those are the types of issues we find coming up, even exercising influence over the elderly person's creation of a will, and how they create the will and who they give which assets to. That's all part of elderly financial abuse. Those are all things that you hear about, or you may see coming across your desk. And from a banking perspective, we try our best to keep our clients' best interests at heart, but sometimes that undue influence may exceed our reach, and it's unfortunate that we have reached this stage in society. It really isn't unfortunate. So I think it's important to keep sensitizing the public as to these are issues happening. These are things that we really want to combat against and ensure that persons who may be voiceless have a voice speaking for them in some form or fashion.
Well, thank you so much on that note, Nicole-Anna de Silva, for joining us today and sharing insight into elder financial abuse and power of attorney and why seniors are at risk. Sign up to be notified about our next live show in the link in the comments below. And as always, be sure to like and follow our page on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook so you never miss a single live show. Thanks again for joining us and have a great day. Bye.